Imagine building a cube so large that 20 Empire State Buildings could fit inside it. Now, picture filling that massive cube with a virtual reality holodome. That's what Saudi Arabia proposed at the start of 2023, and honestly, most people rolled their eyes. Surely this project was impossible. Surely it was just a stunt, but by the end of 2024, construction was underway, and to this day, the developers couldn't be more confident about the completion of this record-breaking building. So let's take a second look at this project and see how far it's come. The cube is designed to be the main attraction of a brand new downtown in the Saudi capital, Riyadh. This downtown is called New Murabba, while the cube itself is named the Mukaab. In case you were wondering, that's literally just the Arabic word for cube. According to plans from 2023, the Mukaab would stand 400 meters tall from top to bottom, which means it would technically be considered a super tall skyscraper. Unlike normal skyscrapers, it would also be 400 meters wide. As mentioned earlier, you could fit 20 Empire State Buildings inside the Mukaab and still have room to spare. This would make it the largest building in the world. Not the tallest, but in terms of volume. The Mukaab would surpass the current record held by the Boeing Everett factory in Washington, being 5 times larger, and the size isn't even the most amazing part of this project. Apparently, stepping inside would feel like entering another world. A colossal dome would be placed inside the cube, covered by a sea of holograms. These holograms would make visitors feel like they're at the bottom of the ocean, on the surface of Mars, or in a magical fantasy realm. At the center of all this would be a spiral tower filled with restaurants, cinemas, and hotels. It would be larger than the Eiffel Tower and the biggest indoor structure ever built. There would also be towers at the corners of the cube, packed with even more rooms and facilities. A network of basements would provide 350,000 square meters of extra space, not to mention the top of the structure, which would be transformed into a giant garden. In total, the entire megastructure would be able to accommodate 250,000 people. Michael Dyke, the CEO of the project, summed it all up pretty well. It's just unbelievable. He's also called it the most complex engineering thing ever undertaken. The official plan has always been to complete it by 2030. It's part of Vision 2030, a broader initiative to shift Saudi Arabia's economy away from oil and towards tourism and technology. It was also recently announced that Saudi Arabia would be hosting the World Expo in 2030. This World Expo, also known as the World Fair, will run for months and see millions of visitors come to Riyadh. Wouldn't it be great if the Mukaab project was finished and ready to greet them? There's a problem though, or rather, a couple of problems. Since the Mukaab was announced, people have been wondering if this structure is technically possible. As we mentioned, the CEO, Michael Dyke, called it the most complex engineering project ever, but maybe it's too complicated. Could any of this actually be done? The second problem is money. Even if the project was technically feasible, funding it is another matter. In total, the New Murabba project is expected to cost about $50 billion. But in 2023, when the project was announced, Dr. Andreas Krieg, an expert in Middle Eastern studies at King's College London, said, "The finances of all this are not entirely secured." This was later confirmed by Knight Frank, a property company, who found that the project had only raised about $3.6 billion, less than 10% of the total cost. All that had come from the Saudi Public Investment Fund. It seemed the project wasn't just relying on local funding. This meant a significant portion of the missing capital had to come from foreign investors. With all this uncertainty surrounding technical requirements and project funding, a lot of people in 2023 were pretty dismissive of the project. A cool idea, sure, with lots of stunning renderings, but something that would actually be built one day? That didn't feel very likely. But then came a bit of a twist. You're looking at the location in Riyadh where the Mukaab is set to be built. This satellite image was taken in February 2023, about a week after the project was first announced. Here's the same spot a few months later. Nothing much has changed, but fast forward to the end of September 2024, and it looks like the foundations for a giant cube are taking shape. We even got our rulers out, and it seems like the sides of this excavation are exactly 400 meters long. The company behind the New Murabba project officially confirmed this in October when they released a statement titled "New Murabba Reaches New Heights." To quote them, excavation at the iconic Mukaab has reached 86% completion. Apparently, 10 million cubic meters of earth have been excavated so far. To put that into perspective, if you piled up all that earth, you'd have enough to fill about 1/6 of the cube itself. All this work was carried out by 900 people, plus 250 excavators. You can spot those excavators in another satellite image. I won't count them, but it definitely looks like a couple hundred machines. The release also mentions a temporary bridge that will be built over King Khalid Road. If you look at the satellite images, you can actually see two roads being constructed here and here, so the bridge will likely connect them. It'll be used by construction teams to move excavators from one side to the other, without disrupting traffic in and out of Riyadh. Let's be clear, digging the foundations and building a bridge is the easy part of a project like this, but it's definitely a start. As the press release goes on to say, all this work is meant to demonstrate the company's strong commitment to the project. Interestingly, the press release also talks a lot about the project's health and safety. It mentions that 3 million safe work hours have been logged so far, that progress and safety go hand in hand. And there's even a quote from Michael Dyke about prioritizing the well-being of our workforce. They're likely overcompensating for the accusations of human rights violations on other projects. At this point, we can't really confirm or deny whether the Mukaab project is treating its workers well, but it's certainly what the company is claiming. This press release doesn't give us an update on the project's completion date, but luckily in the same month, October 2024, Dyke gave an interview in Dubai. We have 2,283 days until the 31st of December 2030, and that will be the point by which the core downtown is online. The Mukaab sits at the heart of that and will be fully functioning. In other words, Dyke still thinks the project will be ready for Expo 2030. Maybe everyone was wrong to doubt the cube. Maybe it's coming after all. But wait, there's something we need to talk about. Earlier, we saw how the Mukaab project was seeking foreign investors. The Saudi Public Investment Fund had contributed only $3.6 billion, less than 10% of the project's total cost. In a recent interview, Dyke was asked about this, but he declined to comment. So has the project managed to raise that money? Actually, probably not. In a completely different interview, again in October 2024, Dyke called for more investment. We have a finite level of capital. So that means we must attract partners. In other words, they're definitely still looking for money, and that raises the question, why is he so confident that the cube will be finished when they're still looking for ways to fund it? We have a theory, but first, if you're enjoying this video and want to see similar content in the future, don't forget to subscribe. Anyway, back to the cube. As we've seen, Michael Dyke has been sending some very mixed messages. On one hand, he's telling everyone who will listen that the project is on track for completion, but at the same time, he's searching for investment. So what's the real situation? Here's a theory. Maybe Dyke says the project will be finished in 2030, not because he truly believes it will happen, but because he knows that kind of confidence is needed to convince other companies to invest. At the end of the day, that's just how the game is played. No one would invest in a project surrounded by so much uncertainty. They're much more likely to back something that seems set for success. They literally announced that construction had started in the exact same month that Dyke made his call for investors. In other words, they're doing everything they can to convince people that this project is legitimate. And that's fair, but it doesn't reveal much about whether it will actually be done in 2030. When it comes to Saudi mega projects, this is actually a familiar story. 2 years ago, we posted a video much like this one when construction first began on the line. They excavated a massive piece of land, 170 kilometers long, and at the same time, officials were traveling the world trying to drum up investment. Apparently, they haven't had much luck, and there are now rumors that the line will be reduced to roughly 2% of its original planned length. But honestly, we don't think money is the determining factor when it comes to whether the Mukaab gets completed by 2030. There are still some major technological hurdles that the project needs to overcome, and with less than 6 years on the clock, time is ticking. In particular, there's the giant holographic dome. Dyke has admitted the technology today exists, but not at the scale we're going to be deploying it. There are technologies like hologram fans, but it's unclear whether they can achieve the scale of the renders shared in 2023. Instead of giant holograms, perhaps the dome could use a wraparound LED screen, like the one in the Las Vegas Sphere. But even then, it would be difficult to pull off. At 15,000 square meters, the screen in the Sphere is the largest in the world, roughly the size of 3 football fields. But the screen in the Mukaab would need to be at least 20 times as large. Maybe that's exactly what Dyke meant when he said the technology exists, but not at the scale they need. However, everything you read about the planned Mukaab still talks about holograms, not LED screens. We will have the world's largest immersive background. We'll be having quite unique experiences interacting with holograms. So, yeah. Either way, the technology isn't there yet, and it seems the project hasn't raised enough money so far. So what does this whole situation mean for the cube? While researching all this, we came across yet another interview with Dyke. It was conducted in November, about a month after all the others. In this interview, he spoke about phase 1 of the project, an interesting phrase that he hasn't used anywhere else. So maybe this is our biggest clue about the future of the Mukaab. Perhaps a phase 1 version of the project will be built by 2030, just in time for that World Expo we mentioned, with phase 2 not completed until later. For example, they might build the exterior of the cube, but not the holographic dome. That would still be a stunning landmark. At the end of 2030, I shall take great pleasure watching the sun go down, standing on the roof of the Mukaab, feeling pretty good about what's under our feet. Remember the Boeing Everett factory, the current record holder for the largest building in the world. That was built in stages too. In 1967, it was constructed at less than half its current size. Then in 1979, the project was expanded, and again in 1990. In other words, you don't always need to build a project all at once. In 2034, Saudi Arabia will host the FIFA World Cup. One of the stadiums will be constructed in New Murabba, so maybe that's another target to aim for? Phase 1 completed for Expo 2030, and Phase 2 finished for the 2034 World Cup. Dyke has also said technologies develop so rapidly every day, we need to leave room for our future generation. Just because something doesn't look possible now, that doesn't mean it won't be possible eventually. But what do you think will happen to the cube? Let us know in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again next time.